Blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in Acts 12 and 13. Little law enforcement takeaway here. Good read. I think this is actually 2 days in a row where we've gotten a law enforcement takeaway. Maybe 3, I don't know. But in chapter 12, verse 2, we see King Herod. And there's been this, and I think law enforcement, we all get this. There's this cultural movement. Defund the police, or whatever the case may be. But King Herod, there's this persecution that we've talked about starting with Saul, persecution of the church. So Herod jumps on the bandwagon, and I don't mean to make light of this because he kills James. He has James killed, and James was one of Jesus's inner circle. When Jesus went on the Mount of Transfiguration, he took Peter, James, and John with him. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he asked his disciples to pray with him, and he took Peter, James, and John a little bit further with him, and they were within earshot of where Jesus was praying. They're the ones that fell asleep and said the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So James was one of the inner circle, those 3 big disciples. And we know about Peter. We hear about him all the time. We know about John. He wrote the book of John. He wrote 1st and 2nd John. He wrote the book of Revelation. We know about John, but we don't hear a whole lot about James. But here James is murdered by King Herod. And so, the crowd cheered for this. The crowd wants to see the Christians persecuted. This Jewish crowd, this Jerusalem crowd is so wishy-washy. They want to follow God, then they don't want to follow God. And so, it's kind of like society today. So when we're reading about all this story and what's going on, we read that this is during the Passover. And when I read this, my first thought was, is this a year after Jesus was crucified? Because Jesus was crucified during Passover. Now Herod, because everybody got excited because he killed James, now he's arrested Peter, and he's like, hey, I'll kill him too. Make me even more popular. But, was this the next Passover? Was it a couple of Passovers later? We don't know. And honestly, it doesn't matter, the timeline right now. Just the events is what matters. The context of this story is what matters. And then in chapter 12, verse 6, Herod, when he puts Peter in jail, he puts 4, I think it said legions of, not legions, 4, I had written it down, 4 squads of soldiers to protect him. And I wondered, so Herod must have heard about Peter being let out of jail by the angels prior to this. And so Herod wasn't going to take any chances. So he sets 4 squads of soldiers. And I haven't looked it up. I don't know what a squad is, but think about it. If a squad was 4, that would be 16 soldiers to guard 1 guy. And it's still not enough, because in verses 7 through 10, the angel frees Peter and leads him to safety. And then, I said it was LEO takeaway. There's an LEO involvement here. In verse 18, it said, it starts talking about the guards, these 4 squads of soldiers. And these weren't like Roman soldiers. They called them soldiers, but these were more like your sheriff's deputies, your jailers, the guy who spent their time in the jails, guarding prisoners, feeding prisoners, all that kind of stuff. But Herod takes these 4 squad of soldiers who were on duty when Peter was led out by the angel, and he executes them. He kills maybe 16 or more what I would consider sheriff's deputies. And it just, man, but don't linger on that too long, because the Bible says you reap what you sow. Well, Herod's definitely about to reap what he sowed. Chapter 12, verse 23, we see that the people, it's again dealing with Herod, and he's talking to the people of Tyre, or Tyre, but anyway, they're he's speaking to them, and they're going, oh, he speaks like a god. Instead of Herod going, I'm not a god, there's only one God. Um, Herod just lets it go on, kind of enjoying the fact that they're saying he speaks like a god. His pride and his arrogance get the best of him, and God will not share his glory with anyone. And boom, Herod dies in a very terrible way. Um, then we get into chapter 13. Chapter 13, this church in Antioch, where Paul and Barnabas are, sounds to me like not a police academy, but a ministry academy. I mean, it starts listing guys that are there that would be bigwigs of the time. I mean, these were the guys that were going to go out and do great things for the church, going to be good pastors and preachers. But they seem to all be there in Antioch, and it's probably because they're teaching and they're training and they're learning from each other, and they're iron sharpening iron is what it seems like. And then the angel of the Lord calls Paul and Barnabas. He says, I got a mission for you guys. Get up and take off for your mission. And they do. And they take a guy with him, a kid, John Mark. And John Mark is a very interesting character because I think it was yesterday we saw where when Peter escaped the first time and he went back to the house, and he knocked on the door, and the servant girl runs back and tells everybody Peter's here, but she didn't let him in. That was John Mark's house. His mom hosted the disciples a lot of times, but that was his house. He grows up in a Christian family with his mom and grandmother teaching him the way, and he is also I don't know if it was a cousin, but he's related to Barnabas. So it's almost like Barnabas is mentoring him and or discipling him, and so Barnabas takes John Mark with him and Paul. Sorry about that. So anyway, they take him with him. Uh, it talks about this false prophet named Bar Jesus that they come to. He had influence over a civic leader and was trying to influence him in a negative way. Paul confronts him head on and gets rid of this false prophet. And then in 13:3, John Mark leaves them. He returns home. And Paul gets upset about this, and we're going to see this as we're going through the New Testament, that Paul was very offended that John Mark left. Causes a lot of trouble. Um, anyway, the Jewish leaders, again, they get upset with Paul because of his teaching, and they get jealous. He's going to take their prestige and their power and authority away, so they want to kill him. The Gentiles rejoice because Paul says, I'm done with the Jews. I'm going to go to the Gentiles and preach to them. We're going to leave it there. Tomorrow we're in Acts 14 and 15. So come back tomorrow. Let's do this again. And in the meantime, you guys be safe.